Hello and welcome. Today I'd like to share 6 force powers to help you improve your DAX. The first tip I'd like to share is the solution to my personal Phantom Menace, which is when a card renders blank. You can see on my accessory sales card that in the year 2019 I was getting $407,000 worth of accessory sales. However, when I choose 2017, I get this blank rendered. Now, I personally don't like seeing blank in cards and multi-row cards, particularly when you've got lots of them. If you've got a ribbon of a multi-row card across the top of your report or elsewhere in your report, and you get a situation where several of the values are blank for whatever reason, it really can be very distracting to see this blank render here. So personally, I would much rather see a 0 or nothing at all, just the category label. Now, there's a couple of ways we can resolve this. One way is to simply add a +0 to the end of the measure that's being used in the card. Now, even though I've labeled it accessory sales, my card actually contains total sales, just with a product category equals accessories filter on it. So we'll go into our total sales measure here. And if I go ahead and add +0 to the end of that measure, you'll see that that resolves my accessory sales issue. I'm now seeing a 0 because there are no accessory sales. But you'll notice the matrix now has an issue. And I don't like this situation either. Now my card is resolved, but now I'm getting a whole bunch of zeros in my matrix, which is just going to add confusion to my matrix, particularly if I choose to drill down into the hierarchy, go to my subcategory level, and now you can see there are just lots and lots of zeros being rendered, a few valid categories for bikes, and then a whole lot more zeros. So I don't like this solution either. The solution to this is to actually go about cloning my measure. Before we do that, let's go and return total sales back to its normal state. So open up my measure, remove the +0. My accessory sales once again renders blank, but now my matrix is rendering correctly. I'm just seeing bike sales because only bikes were sold in 2017. Once I move into 2018 or 2019, I have both accessories and clothing sales, and now my accessory sales card is working once again. So in order to resolve the issue for 2017, I need to go ahead and add a new measure. Okay, so to ensure that we're getting the correct values appearing in the card that are consistent with the values we're seeing in our matrix, we need to clone our total sales measure. Now, because I'm going to clone it and make that modification of adding the +0 at the end of it, I need to make sure I have a way of clearly understanding the difference between the two measures. And so I just like to use a hashtag at the beginning of my new measure name. That lets me know that this measure is going to return a 0 or a blank value at the end. So I'll go ahead and create a new measure, and I'll call this one hashtag total sales. Another tip I'd like to share with you as I'm resolving this problem is a trick I've learned on how to quickly reference a measure. Have you ever been in the situation where you've tried to type in something like total and you're getting so many different options available in your intellitext that you just don't see the measure you're chasing? Particularly when you're using something like total, where you're getting a bunch of functions as well as a bunch of potential valid measures. Well, my solution to this is to actually start your reference with the square bracket. That will then ensure you're only getting a list of measures. And then as soon as you type in top, you get all of your total measures. And here I can see my total sales. I can just go ahead and select that. And now I can add my +0. Now I've just created a new measure, so I need to give it appropriate formatting. This one will have currency and 0 decimal places for consistency. And then I just want to make sure I go and add it to my accessory sales card. So I'll take out my total sales, I'll put in my hashtag total sales, I'll relabel this to accessory sales. I now have my accessory sales, and when I select 2017, I'm getting the 0 being rendered in my card, but I'm not getting all of those zeros appearing in my matrix. Only bytes is appearing in my matrix. Now you recall I also mentioned the option of seeing it rendering just as a completely blank card, only displaying the category label. That is an option as well. And for that, I'll just make a slight adjustment to my hashtag total sales measure. So rather than total sales plus 0, in order to get the blank rendered, I'm going to need to wrap it inside an if statement. So I will go ahead and if total sales equals blank, then I want to return nothing. So to return nothing is just an empty text string. And the result, if false, so in other words, if total sales is not rendering blank, then I want to return total sales. Close brackets and enter. And now we can see the accessory sales is rendering completely blank. It doesn't matter which of these options you choose to go for. I often switch between the two depending on what I'm trying to achieve in the situation. Either, in my personal opinion, are preferable to seeing the word blank across my card. I'm sure many of you will have seen this next tip before. However, it is one of my favorite things to add into a workbook, particularly when I'm working with display measures, as it allows me to separate the display measures from the functional measures elsewhere in my workbook. I'm going to create a measures table in my workbook, and I'm going to move my hashtag total sales up into my display measures table, where I can easily identify the difference between my display measures and my regular measures. To create one of these measures tables, I need to start off by clicking on the Enter Data button up in my home ribbon. When the Create Table wizard appears, I'm not going to enter anything into column 1, and I'm just going to give my table a name, in this case, Display Measures. Once the table has loaded, you will see it appear in your Fields pane as a normal table. There's nothing special about it at present. It is just a normal table with a column of data. That column just happens to be empty. I'm going to select my hashtag total sales measure, and in the home table, I'm just going to reassign that into my display measures table. Now that I have a measure inside my display measures table, I can go ahead and remove column 1. I'll click on the More Options menu and choose Delete from Model. That will delete the column out of the table, and as a result, the table will have nothing in it except measures. Once the only thing inside the table is measures, we can see that Power BI automatically updates it to a measures display folder and allocates it to the top of the Fields pane. So it's easy to go and find. It's always readily accessible at the top of the workbook. Well, the next tip I want to look at is adding an icon into a visual. So on my matrix, I have my total sales, my percentage change versus prior year, and I actually have a measure over here called change icon. And this measure allows me to return an up or down arrow inside the matrix to just sort of give me a graphical representation of which direction the change is heading. We'll come back and look at this formula in a second. Now, if I put my change icon onto my matrix, sure enough, we can see up and down arrows. So let's go and have a deeper look at this formula, because there's a couple of tips I would like to introduce you to within this formula. Now, this is a display measure, so I'm actually going to start off by moving this measure into my display measures folder. So with my measure selected, I'll just come into the home table and say, put this in the display measures table. Okay, now you'll notice that my first variable here down equals UNICHAR 129055. Now, I know what that is, but I guarantee you in 6 months' time, I'm going to have no idea what that is. We can use the UNICHAR function in order to render an icon, or we can just simply use a text string to render that icon. Let me show you what I mean. Here I have the up arrow next to accessories, so I'm going to right click and copy. Now I'm just going to copy this value from the matrix, but if you have the UNICHAR icon visible on a browser or something like that, you can do this by simply copying and pasting the icon from the browser. So I'm going to start off by commenting out my full reference to the UNICHAR code, and I'm going to replace it with the up arrow. And I just do that by pasting in that up arrow. Oops, we're talking down arrow here, so this one's in the wrong place. I need to actually put this one down here next to the up arrow. See, this is exactly why I prefer this approach rather than referencing the UNICHAR code, because the UNICHAR code doesn't make it visibly obvious which direction I'm talking about. But once I put in the up arrow here, I can see straight away the up needs to sit next to the up and the down needs to sit next to the down. So let's just go ahead and make a change to each of the other directions. We've got a side and a down here as well. Okay, so I've now got each of the arrows appropriately represented in my formula. I find just looking at the formula now a lot easier to understand what's going on. So I'll click OK, and we'll go and have a look at the visual, and the visual looks exactly the same. We've got an up arrow when there's an increase in sales, a down arrow when there's a decrease in sales, and we've got a double up arrow when the increase in sales is significant. Replacing UNICHAR icons with the actual icon in the text string helps you look at your measure and understand exactly what your measure is returning. Now, the next trick I'd like to show you is what if you've done something like I've done here, where I've got this variable called test. Now, that's not really a very good name, but I've referenced the result of this variable many times in order to get the appropriate allocation of whether I'm looking at a single up or down arrow or a double up or down arrow. Now, I don't want to go through and make this change one value at a time. That's going to be quite slow. But you'll notice now that I've just clicked on one of them, all of them have highlighted. If I make a change to one of them at the moment, then I make that change to just one and I have to do each one independently. But if I press Ctrl Shift L, I select all of them at the same time. And now I can replace all of them with a more appropriate variable name. So I'll call this % change. There's one other tip I'd like to share with you today: troubleshooting your variables. When I'm writing a complex formula, this one's not a particularly complex formula, but it has many variables in it, so you get the idea. And sometimes when you're writing these more complex formulas, sometimes you run into roadblocks and you don't want to lose what you've written, but at the same time you can't move forward because what you've written isn't working and you need to move past it. So, for example, let's say these two lines are causing me issues in my formula. I can just highlight these two lines and comment them out, and we can actually do it in a couple of different ways. The first way is Ctrl K C, and that will just comment out all of the lines you've got selected, and it comments them out line by line. To return that to a normal state, Ctrl K U, and it returns to a normal state. Another option for you is Ctrl Shift A, and Ctrl Shift A will introduce the midline comment. Ctrl Shift A, again to undo. Now, notice the subtle difference there. I'm commenting out entire lines at the moment, so Ctrl K C is appropriate. To undo, Ctrl K U, and it returns. But what if I want to just comment out this section of my line? Well, now Ctrl K C doesn't help because it comments out the whole line. Ctrl K U again to undo. So this is where I use Alt Shift A, and I just comment out the section mid-line. I can go ahead, make the changes and adjustments I need, and then Alt Shift A again to undo it. I hope I was able to introduce to you a new tip that you weren't already aware that you could use inside DAX. I wish you well, and may the 4th be with you.